Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. So we're here today to have a discussion around coaching and mentoring in the workplace. And I'd firstly like to introduce myself. Christine Kirkby. I'm a lecturer at the College of Animal Welfare, lecturing in ILM coaching and mentoring programs, and also the ILM leadership and management programs. And with me today is Mike Porter and Will Dickens, both from the NHS, who completed their level 5 coaching and mentoring programs with the college. And I'd like to just go round the room and just get you to introduce yourself. So Mike, perhaps you could introduce yourself first, please.
Yeah, thanks, Christine. So my name is Mike Porter. I work for the NHS Graduate Management Training Scheme as a trainee support manager. I'm based in Bolton and I support and coach trainees on the graduate scheme in the Northwest region. And I've been in this role for just over 2 years.
Fab. Thank you. Thanks, Mike. And Will, please.
Thank you, Christine. Hi again, Mike. Nice to see you. It's not been too long since the last time we caught up. And yeah, so very similar to Mike. So my name is very similar in terms of the role. So I work essentially as similar as a trainee support manager in the NHS Graduate Management Training Scheme. So my kind of role, similar to Mike as well, is more in kind of conduct, performance and well-being, and how we support the trainees in the NHS. So just under 2 years as well, working in the TSM
similar
role.
times.
Very similar, yeah. And similarly, work in, I'm not sure, Mike, I think you're in 2 regions too. So I work for the East of England and also the Midlands as well, although I live in the Southwest. So quite varied across the role. So,
absolutely, yeah. Yes. Well, thank you and welcome today anyway. So just starting us off then, leading on from your roles in the NHS as trainee support managers, what was your inspiration then to become a coach within your organisation? If I direct that first, sorry, at Mike, please.
Yeah, thanks, Christine. So yeah, as part of our roles, we work with these graduate trainees who have been identified as potential future leaders of the NHS. And I think a big part of our role is to have coaching conversations to help empower them, build their confidence and independence, ability to make decisions. So I think coaching was a kind of a key part of the role. And I remember when, talking to Will and some of our other colleagues about taking on a coaching qualification to really cement some of those conversations that we have and bring in some tools and techniques to really enrich some of those conversations that we have. So that was the background to us wanting to do the coaching qualification and to build on some of those existing kind of skills that we were already displaying, but to build on those. And it certainly has resulted in that. But that was the background from where I was about 18 months ago.
Right, yeah, okay, lovely, thank you. And Will, yourself then, your thought, what was your inspiration?
Thank you. Yeah, it's very similar, but I think slightly different. So I always was interested in coaching, mentoring from a sports science perspective. So my background primarily before the NHS was kind of sports science, kind of sports performance. So I've always enjoyed kind of like coaching, psychology, using models to help support, performance in sport. So essentially when I joined the NHS and kind of spawned into the role of the TSM, it had that kind of very much external pastoral, essentially that role. So it always had that ability to coach and support and mentor those trainees who are kind of aspiring in the NHS. So it was always a big interest to me. And I think I was inspired through some of the colleagues. I think I was late to the party. Mike was there first. And I think working with colleagues, working with others in the team really inspired me to kind of work to that level and kind of to support those trainees further. And it was, really insightful to kind of have that interest and that, I think that inspiration to do it. And it was, I think since doing it, it's been fantastic for that, just that ability to develop those skills to help support, coach and mentor those trainees.
Excellent, thank you, Will. So I know that in both of your roles then and for the course as well, you worked with a couple of different coachees that you had to undertake for the course. But obviously since then, you've presumably had a few more coachees that you've worked with. But Mike, if I could come to you first, and then I'll come to you, Will. If you could share some of those experiences that you had with some of the coachees, and what impact it had on you, or perhaps the coachee's life as well.
Yeah, I mean, I found it absolutely fascinating after we'd had the training sessions and to put into place, I think, some of the communication skills and demonstrating things like active listening and questioning styles. So working with the coaches initially, doing the diagnostic exercises, bringing in a coaching contract, kind of setting those boundaries, but having those really kind of constructive and really valuable conversations. And I challenged myself on my listening skills because I thought I was a really good listener before starting the course. But the active listening, kind of reflection, really opened my eyes on the value of active listening and questioning styles. So I worked with 3 coaches during the course, and we really had some great conversations, setting objectives and progressing those. And 3 of those coaches now have moved on to leadership roles in the NHS. So there's a real result there, because that is
that's such a positive outcome, isn't it?
Yeah, one of the high-level objectives of the graduate scheme. And since I've finished the qualification, I've worked with 2 other coaches outside of the graduate scheme, and they're progressing themselves. One is, in a more senior role than I am. Another coachee had some challenges in the role, but is now really kind of progressing and taking on more responsibilities in the role. So I'm seeing results and success with them as well, which is fantastic experience for me.
Yeah, brilliant. No, I know when we've had previous discussions, it's so nice to hear that positive feedback, and how it's improved and enriched those people's lives, really. Will, if I can come to you now, please, and you could share some of your experiences, please.
Yeah, of course. No, thank you. Yeah, it's been very insightful in a short space of time. I think that's the best summary. And very very similar again around kind of supporting not only the trainees and actually some of the senior managers more recently in kind of the course of the ILM, which was really insightful around having those real life examples, which is fantastic.
Yeah.
And in particular, one trainee that I was supporting again, he's just secured a very kind of senior role, kind of post scheme, which is fantastic. So kind of the retention of supporting them at a time when kind of cherry picked him out the group, and in terms of his kind of backstory, I had no idea about what he'd been through in terms of the scheme. So is that a very fortuitous kind of point in kind of his personal life, which he kind of needed that coaching, mentoring, and also the professional development as well that we went through, and kind of supporting him in his kind of leadership development, his kind of ability to be more resilient, how he handles difficult conversations with managers in his role. So overall, it's a really kind of organic process that he could kind of get from. And from my perspective, it was fantastic to see that progression in him. And I think ultimately having that retention that he kind of gained a really positive kind of senior role from the scheme from a time when he was actually struggling. Yeah, it's really, really good to see, and yeah, really rewarding, which is that's nice as well.
It's such a nice feeling, isn't it? And to get that feedback, to know that they have actually grown not only in themselves and their confidence, but in the workplace as well, and they've progressed.
Definitely.
It's really good to hear how positive those experiences have been, not just for you as coaches, but also for those coachees too. That's really good. So do you feel then that with that experience that they've had of coaching, I'm going to pose the question, I think, to Will, with regards to, do you feel that there has been benefits to the organisation itself, having that coaching and mentoring program in your organisation?
Oh, 100%. Yeah, because we support so many trainees across the NHS as a whole wide. Certain counties and regions have allocated trainees, so they'll all have their kind of batch, so to speak. So I think if we as a whole system, as an arm to help support our aspiring leaders, have this kind of essentially a lever process of supporting them in their own coaching and mentoring, how they can, kind of problem solve their own issues, how can they handle difficult conversations, can they be more resilient as they work through stress. It's kind of tenfold development, and I think the benefit to the whole system, which then kind of cascades into the each specialism of the trainee, is massive, and they then have that massive effect, which then goes into their teams that they support. So it's a real collective leadership, and I think that's what's nice about it, is that it kind of goes far and wide across every region and every borough trust that then those trainees then go to work for and work in. So it's really really good.
A good positive experience for them, and very beneficial, obviously, to the organisation. So thank you, Will. If I could then come to Mike, if you could sort of look at some of the benefits then you feel that there have been to the individuals themselves that you've coached, please.
Yeah, I think when I've got feedback from the coachees, I think the obvious one is their confidence and their independence in solving any challenges or problems that they're having in their role, but identifying those objectives and learning how to take that forward and having the motivation, following the coaching conversations independently and autonomously. Progressing those. So some of the obvious benefits is the coachees who have kind of progressed their career into a more senior or leadership role in the NHS, but also some of the other coachees that I've worked with who have stayed in their role but are taking on more responsibilities and getting that job satisfaction that they may not have been getting previously. Yeah. So they're driving their own performance, which links to the benefit of the organisation, but also the benefit to the individual as well. They're performing better, getting more job satisfaction and recognition.
That's really important, isn't it?
Forward, of course. So it's a win-win situation for both, really, in the coaching.
Absolutely, yeah. Yeah, no, thank you for that. It's interesting, isn't it, to look at it from both sides of the coin, looking at it from the organisation point of view and from the individual, and it is extremely beneficial to all round. So obviously, when you were having your sessions with your coachees and continue to have those, obviously, are there or have there been any specific challenges for you as a coach, and maybe with those challenges, what did you actually then learn from that? I'll pose that question first to Mike, please.
Yeah, it's an interesting question, and I think there have been challenges both doing the course last year and since then. Some of that is time management, because you've got to invest the time to make coaching work. But I think if you do manage your time effectively, you'll see the benefits from coaching, but you've got to commit to it. So it's that time management, because we're all busy.
Everybody's busy. Doesn't matter whatever field you're in, does it? Everybody's busy.
Exactly. So I pride myself on being an organised individual coming from a project management background. But the coaching really taught me you've really got to look at your time management again, and committing to coaching, I think, is needed. So time management will be my first challenge. Keeping the momentum once you've established that coaching relationship. So not letting there be, big gaps between those coaching conversations, especially in the early days of a coaching relationship. And then also managing feedback. So being honest with a coachee, creating that safe space, and also remembering to go out for feedback to the coachee, because that's such an important part of the course that I learned.
Definitely.
That self-reflection and being proactive in asking for feedback, and it's got to work two ways.
Yeah, definitely has. Thank you, Mike. Will, your thoughts on that one then, please?
Thank you, Christine. Yeah, again, quite similar to Mike, certainly around reflection. I think some of the coaches that I supported, which are fantastic, they were very open to that reflection. And I think in that time, it made it far more beneficial to the process. But I think the kind of the real development for me, I think, happened after that kind of ILM course into actually the final works of those perhaps and those senior managers and the coaches and the trainees that we supported in the kind of the GMTS, where some were perhaps not as open to being reflective, having types of feedback,
Yes.
and perhaps not being kind of open to the idea of personal development or kind of being coached. So for them, it didn't come as natural, I think, for us as those who kind of were okay, yeah, I'm happy to kind of volunteer for this. So I think some of those challenges, I think, is changing the mindset, and it's changing the kind of the stigma of kind of yeah, okay, this is the way we've always done it, that type of mentality.
Yes.
Even if it doesn't work, you think, why are you still doing that? So I think challenges around that, I think, are initial. They're kind of short term, but I think once you kind of address the need and the rationale and kind of give it the context of why we are kind of changing or kind of refining kind of our approach, our skills, our qualities, particularly in the NHS in terms of the coaches and the trainees. For me, it was a big learning curve around trying to then adapt and be more adaptable, more approachable in that respect, and kind of getting across. A key thing was that diagnostic kind of assessment. So checking, okay, how can I help you? You know, how can you help yourself in some ways? What have you done? And I think that then drove the idea of, okay, personal reflection, and then kind of getting that out the way, and that they could see as like a SWOT analysis, essentially, how they can actually refine themselves and think, okay, where am I at as a starting point? How can I change potentially? And how can you, as in me, support that process? So I think getting that across to them was really insightful and quite a big challenge. But I think the more practice you kind of engage in, the easier it gets. Again, it's not a fail-safe method, but it gets a bit easier.
Gets easier with time, doesn't it? Yeah, and the more coaches that you work with, yeah. But I think sometimes, do you think that sometimes it is difficult with some organisation? I think you're probably fairly lucky in your organisation that you've got that culture there that's trying to install coaching and mentoring within the organisation, and they're really promoting it. But it is quite difficult, I think, in some organisations to do that, is to have that culture where you're thinking it's a positive thing to have coaching and mentoring in the organisation. Because like you've said, sometimes you'll get some coachees where they're thinking, well, why am I being put on this? Is it because I'm doing something wrong? It's a way to see that you're helping develop them as an individual, isn't it?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, right. I think it always goes hands in hand, I think, with the scheme which myself might work on, because it's that kind of aspiration to be a very positive kind of developmental, motivating leader. So I think it does go hand in hand, thankfully. We do kind of get a few senior managers, I'm sure you're the same probably, Mike, and that they're a bit resistant to kind of seeing things a different way, and it can be a bit more resistant. But I think, again, it's down to your the interpersonal skills and how you overcome those challenges and change your kind of communication or your approach. But ultimately, it's always a good learning process.
Absolutely, it definitely is. And I think that brings us on to another point, really, as to what sort of qualities you feel are important that you should have as a coach. Obviously in that role you've spoke about being supportive, and it's having that knowledge as well around your own sort of subject area and the models and tools that you're going to be using. But what do you believe makes a great coach? If I direct that up Mike first, please.
Yeah, I think the first thing that comes to mind is being a good listener and communicator. So I think I mentioned before about active listening. What does that actually mean? And then being a responsive communicator and using in the conversations different questioning types to enable those conversations to be as productive as possible. I also think as a coach, I've learned that you need to be patient, when listening to coaches, and also positive thinking with a positive approach to problem solving. And you can bring in different models, but having a positive approach to the conversations and to feedback. And I think come into those conversations in different situations with that mindset, you see the response from the coachees, and you're very likely to get that positive approach back, especially if you're trying to empower the coachee to take responsibility, for their objectives.
Thank you, Mike. And Will, your thoughts, please, on what qualities you think there should be to make you a great coach?
Yeah, I certainly echo all of those from Mike. Yeah, absolutely. It's I think your interpersonal skills, ability to communicate, types of feedback you can vary, being adaptable. I think one which I think sticks out for me is I think that interest just to be curious about improving your personal and professional development. And I think that goes a long way around being curious with resources, being resourceful of how to improve, utilizing technology, and actually having that open-minded approach, reflection to improve kind of what you're doing and actually why you're doing it and what's the benefit to you, and having that open reflection I think is really, really important as something as a key skill quality, and it certainly helps to support the whole process from not only the short term but also follow-ups, the long-term reflections, and just staying curious to kind of improve, and to be just an open, active listener and be mindful of change. I think that's been one of the best qualities I think that I can kind of adopt and promote in my conversations. I think it's so far going well.
Good.
And it's not all the time does it kind of meet, and it's trying to kind of make people aware of that kind of emotional intelligence of what you're trying to get across, and how is that important to them, and finding out their values and their approaches and what does it mean to them. And I think that's a really important kind of quality that you need to adopt in those conversations to ensure that you can get across that specialist knowledge, those models, because without that initial interest and drive, everything else I think is a bit a bit shallow.
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, it's a bit like you've both said. You've made the comment that being positive, having that encouragement, because you're trying to encourage those coachees to be able to reach their goals, and having that knowledge as well about certain sort of goals and tools and techniques that you can use with them, is going to help sort of install that in the process. So there are a number of different tools, as we've mentioned before, but there are a number of different models also. And I know that in your own, when you were doing your course, you used the GROW model. But maybe you could explain what you felt worked particularly well for you, and was it having that GROW model to work with and follow that process? Did you find that really useful? And would you maybe use other different models in the future, perhaps? If I pose that question to Will, please.
Yeah, that's a really good question, particularly around, I think the availability of models. I think has been a fantastic, and I think trial and error. I think one of the best thing I've kind of adopted around my processes for coachees at the time, as well as now in the GMTS. But I think the GROW model was something which I used very, very kind of consistently across most conversations. And I think it was a fantastic tool to use as a starter, kind of as a middle and an end as well. So it allowed a really fantastic reflective process that those coachees and now kind of the colleagues that we support now in the GMTS can still use. And it's so fundamentally kind of apparent and kind of insightful, but it's so basic as well. And I think it keeps it really relative to the kind of the 4 key pillars of that kind of that goal, response, action, and how it supports the reality and opportunities, and how that relates to everything else for them. I've adopted the similar to the SWOT analysis as well, which is very, very important. Again, nice as a diagnostic before, middle, and end. And again, been really insightful around using that as just evidence-informed processes, really. I think those are the best models to use if they work. I've previously used or tried to use the skill wheel, and it's a bit, in comparison, this is my approach and kind of my reflection, is a bit clunky. It's not as kind of straight off the bat as GROW. So for me, I think GROW is a really, really good model. It links to SWOT very well.
It does indeed. Yeah.
It can be utilised, I think, across many different parts of the conversation, and in particular the rationale of why that coachees that you're supporting as well.
Excellent. No, thank you for that, because I do think when you're, especially when it's something that you're beginning with, and like with yourself and Mike in the beginning when you were undertaking your course, it's nice to start off with the GROW model, I think, and sort of breaks you in gently into that process. But it's a good model to work with. What's your thoughts, Mike, on that?
Yeah, I agree with Will. I think the GROW model was a great starting point, but I've looked at others such as the OSCAR model, which was really useful as well. But
Yes.
I've gone back to the GROW model because I think
Have
it's
you? Right.
simplicity and effectiveness. And I like the idea that you can go through the 4 stages, and at each stage, just go back to the goals and make sure we're getting that right. Make sure we've got the right goals and objectives that will inform how this coaching program will go forward with each coachee. So yeah, I found the GROW model, and it's highly recommended. Very powerful in kind of identifying those goals and objectives. I've also used a couple of other models. I've kind of referred back to the coach's handbook that we got.
Oh yes, yes.
We referred, when we're doing the assignments, and it was available on the VLE. One that springs to mind is the 6-step model to problem solving. So you break a problem down, so it's presented, discussed and agreed, and then you do the same but focus on solutions. So that is structuring a conversation about problem solving using 6 steps, and I've used that with one coachee, and it really broke it down, identifying and framing that problem and the solutions, and it was effective on putting a plan and way forward.
So you could use that in conjunction then with the GROW model?
Yeah, so I think we started off with a GROW model, and as the conversations continued, we identified some challenges. And instead of having just a general conversation, I think these models can help structure that conversation.
Absolutely.
And come to some practical steps once you've used the model. And I think it helped us also remember what we had talked about in a previous conversation as well, once you've used that model.
Yeah. No, they're really useful for keeping you on track as well, I think, because if you're going to use that for each session, you're going to be reviewing what you've done previously, and then it helps you then look at that goal. Do you need to change that goal? Do you need to break it down into maybe more bite-sized chunks? And that's where I think your problem-solving one had helped you address that. So that you could then look at ways, you could look at the options and then look at their reality of the situation, and then how they were going to plan their way forward to be able to reach that goal. So I personally as well really love the GROW model. So I can see how it's worked well for you, but potentially in the future though, there might be the need with different personalities, etc. There might be the need to change your models and different tools dependent on that personality that you're working with. But I think it would be nice to talk about some of your success stories as well. So I know that now that you've worked with a number of different coachees, have you got some of those success stories to tell us? And if you could just give me a little bit of information about how you actually came about that information. So if you heard about one of the coachees that you were working with and how they've developed and progressed, maybe it's a promotion, etc., then how did you come about that information? How was that success measured? So I think I'll come to you, Will, first, please.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, that's a really good question again. I'd say the biggest measure of success, I think, from a personal and I suppose a developmental point of view, is I think where we kind of hear about trainees in the system and in obviously the GMTS, which whether we support through coaching and mentoring, that they fulfill jobs and they get a very high-banded role. So traditionally that they're essentially, when they work in the NHS, they're coming at a kind of a band 6 level, which is where they work and they still complete their work. And we have some trainees that essentially fulfill roles and gained fantastic roles, which are kind of near band 8, which again are really, really positive kind of developments for them.
Absolutely.
And kind of hearing about that is fantastic for their kind of professional development, but equally hearing about how it's personally affected them, where they've got, I think is one of the biggest things. So essentially, I was supporting a trainee who essentially had to defer the scheme. So essentially, they weren't very well for personal reasons, had to stop it and then restart again. And through that, reignite kind of year 1 and complete year 2 again. And through that time, when they were part of my kind of as a coachee, we looked at many different themes across kind of the SWOT, the GROW models, building resilience, looking at handling complex conversations, being more kind of assertive, being more kind of demonstrating of collective leadership. So really key pillars and themes which supported them personally in their own kind of development, but equally practically and professionally when they got into their role and how they fulfilled their role. So seeing that cascade and how they developed in their placement in the NHS, how they then supported other colleagues in the team, how they kind of led and became almost like as a leader themselves, which is obviously what we wanted.
Brilliant.
And it became very organic and it became very kind of reflective, and they kind of had a bit of a penny drop moment. I thought, cracky, I'm doing it, and it's actually working. So it's really
working,
rewarding. It was really rewarding for them to see. And I had their placement and their program manager contact me regarding kind of the trainees kind of approach and how they led on projects, and it was really insightful to hear from their perspective, quite objective, say, oh, you know, this trainee's showing really good X, Y, and Z, and you know how they're being more resilient and more kind of diligent on leadership, some of the things which we worked on. So it's nice to hear from an outsider essentially.
Absolutely.
On how they developed, and then consequently they fulfilled a role within the trust that they're working at, because they really loved how their approach had changed and kind of their development on the scheme and how they could lead projects, and obviously subsequently got a fantastic role post scheme. So it was a really good all round from a start.
That's a really good success story. That is excellent.
Yeah, it's good.
Yeah, one to be really proud of.
Yeah, I mean, I helped. I was just provide the tools. I think they did the hard work. So
absolutely, but with your guidance and support. Yeah. Well done. And then your thoughts and some success stories from yourself, Mike, please. Thank you, Will.
Yeah, of course. Similar to Will, I've seen kind of coaches as part of the graduate scheme move on to their leadership or management roles, which is one of the objectives of the scheme, and the coaching conversations has assisted that. And I think one of the trainees said to me that he would have been happy with a certain level of role. And following the coaching sessions, he achieved 1-2 grades higher than what he was initially aiming for, which is a fantastic achievement. Yeah. But seeing, the trainees moving to new roles, I think it's also getting the feedback from them. So as part of the kind of the coaching training, we get the feedback, we measure progress against those set objectives, and also getting feedback from their line managers so they can see their progress throughout the coaching program and after that. And I followed up with a few of them after the coaching session had closed down to see how they were getting on since the coaching had finished, and it was all positive. They're taking on more responsibilities. I've had a couple of shout outs on LinkedIn as well, so that's feedback that's not been prompted, which is always nice to hear.
Oh, that's lovely.
It's good to hear from people recognizing the coaching, because they may not realize the effectiveness at the start or while they're going through it, but after the coaching program has ended, they recognize how valuable that was, and giving them the confidence and the tools to progress their career or to take on more responsibilities in their own roles, which is, again, it's a benefit for everybody.
Of course, yeah. Oh, that's fabulous, isn't it? Really good to hear those success stories, how it's worked well, and it gives you, not only for them as well, having that sense of achievement for those individuals, but makes you feel good too, doesn't it? It's really beneficial for everyone, like you say, not just for those individuals, but for the whole organisation. So yeah, thank you for sharing that. So just moving on then to having dealt with some of the different coachees that you have dealt with in the past, presumably you've come up against different personalities. So how did you find you adapted your approach to different personalities? What did you do in those circumstances? If I direct that to Will, please.
Yeah, so in terms of adaptation, it was, for me, one of the biggest things, I think, with the GMTS that we work in. It's having such a massive variety and diverse background of trainees that we support. So there's always going to be opportunities where those differences lie, which is fantastic.
Yes.
But how they can be potentially introvert or extroverted, and how their approach to development or no development is, yeah, something quite a skill. So kind of adapting that approach usually for me would be trying to develop the rapport straight away in that initial session, and
yeah,
kind of
it's really important, isn't it?
Yeah, it was, yeah, certainly, and kind of gauging their general interest, general conversation, assessing their kind of behavior and their kind of character, and seeing how that kind of responds with general questions, and then kind of refining then the kind of context of the coaching or the mentoring models, and potentially how that sits with them. So I always like to kind of refer back to them leading the session and me just providing that scaffold. So having them led the session, it certainly helped it to gravitate to how they best work, whether it be kind of more kind of written or verbal, or looking at kind of types of feedback or types of communication skills, varying tone, varying body language. And I think gauging, I think when we were working with the coachees, is I think not only did they learn about the skills of coaching, mentoring, but equally understanding general interpersonal skills as well. So how, yeah,
Yes.
you get to know a person, you get to know about their personal and professional insights. It's amazing how you kind of, when you try and support someone, it's amazing how much they can kind of describe personally to you. And I think that's kind of a key adaptation of your approach is, they're going to tell you some sensitive things, some confidential things as well. So it's being mindful of how you then deal with those themes.
Absolutely.
And then bringing it back to how you can then know your limitations to the session, and giving them that idea as well, that, you're not a full-blown psychologist in that respect, but at the same time, you can certainly provide practical evidence-based tools to support them. And I think that was quite a skill to ensure that you could adapt quickly, but also refer to as well long-term to help adapt many coachees and mentees as well.
Yes, and also I think from that point of view as well, is knowing your outside resources as well that you could use in order to perhaps refer them on to somewhere else if it's outside of your remit. So it's knowing not just about adapting it within the sessions, but if it's outside of your remit, knowing where you can then go to. Perhaps it might be the need for a counsellor, for example, or other.
Yeah,
definitely. But it's knowing when to draw that line, isn't it?
Yeah, we usually we have, for example, like occupational health kind of bodies within the NHS, or kind of referrals through to the GPs, for example, that many a time regularly I usually kind of recommend and liaise and kind of suggest for their own personal development and personal assessments, and how they then bring that back to the NHS and their trust job. And I think that's where the two parties join. And I think having that colleague and that professional to kind of think, okay, well, have you considered this? Could you possibly refer to that? And they kind of think, oh yeah, that's probably a good idea. So it's definitely knowing your boundaries in respect of coaching and mentoring, but equally being respectful for them too, and kind of supporting them and not disregarding it if they do say it in that theme or that kind of discussion, because no doubt they will. So I think
they will, because if you've built that rapport with them,
exactly,
then they're definitely going to open up with you.
Exactly, yeah, because they trust, and I think they trust you as a profession. So it's a great honor in that respect, and it's then having that kind of awareness and adaptability to refer to the right bodies, isn't it?
Absolutely, yeah. Thank you, Will, for that. And your thoughts, Mike, please.
Yeah, I think that was really interesting what Will was just saying, and especially with the building trust and building rapport. And I think it's, something as a coach that I've reflected on, is that ability to adapt, how to do that, especially in the early stages of a coaching relationship. But other things that I've been thinking about is, since I've been working with coachees after finishing the course who are probably more senior, is adapting the use of diagnostic tools. Because one coachee was keen on the communication of learning styles questionnaires, but another coachee wasn't. So we had a different approach to how we would kind of work out how these conversations would go and setting objectives. And they were very clear on, they had a great idea of what objectives they wanted to set, but wanted to do it in a structured way, which is why she registered for coaching. So yeah, I think it's just adapting, diagnostic tools or other tools or models to be used, and also adapting to the person in terms of building rapport and making that connection with a coachee. But I think as I've grown in confidence, taking on other coachees, I've learned how to adapt and learn from each experience with the feedback that I've received.
Thank you, because it's not always, sometimes you may well do these different questionnaires for learning styles, for communication styles, but that's not to say that they're going to change throughout the whole process. So it's having that good rapport with them, understanding that relationship, seeing when those changes take place and what they prefer as well in that communication with yourselves. They might prefer something different to what actually comes out as their result on one of their questionnaires. So it's having that conversation and building that rapport and understanding each other is really important, to know what you can do best then as a coach for them. So I find it all very interesting how we can use all of these tools and techniques, but it's a huge amount of it is to do with the relationship that you have with that individual. But just sort of thinking about others in the role of coach, if somebody came to you then and said, oh, I'm thinking about becoming a coach, what advice would you give them, Will?
I'm going to fly the flag of the CAW. It's I think finding the right training provider, I think, is key. I think straight off the bat, I think if you got that initial interest, I think finding that provider that can give you the right resources, the right one-to-ones, kind of the theoretical, the practical application, and the whole course itself, I think is a key one. Utilizing reviews and things to make sure you choose the right provider, I think is really important. And all jokes aside, I think it's been a great experience that obviously myself and Mike have been on, and I think it's enabled massive development personally and professionally in the role. And I think it's not an easy kind of qualification at all, but it can be very rewarding. No. The work that you've got to put in, I think just being mindful of that time management, that ability to kind of be diligent on completing assessments and assignments, and I think being open to what the whole coaching and mentoring is about. I think you don't really understand it until you're in it. So although
absolutely
on paper it's can I be a coach? Yeah, I can probably coach, but it's in the process of, it's not just that kind of 5-minute discussion. It's a huge reflection, isn't it? And a whole process which you kind of support someone with.
So much involved with it, so much right from the start of the program to the finish. And it's not just coming on board with those study sessions that you came in with and doing some of the different activities and getting involved with it, but it's all of the paperwork that's associated with it as well, because there is an awful lot of time that you have to put into it. So it's being aware of that also, which I'm glad you brought that up. Well,
definitely. Yeah, no, be the best advice. Research the training providers, the best opportunities they provide, but equally being aware of probably what's at stake and how much the demand is on you as the potential coach and mentor as well. But I think it's a great sector and a profession to get into.
Excellent. Thank you, Will. Mike, your thoughts then, please.
Yeah, so I think advice for anybody interested in becoming a future coach, I just say it's a key leadership skill. It really is, in terms of driving performance and empowering, individuals or teams. So if you have the kind of tools, techniques, the skills and experience, you can with confidence coach individuals and improve their performance or their career prospects. And I think the course kind of taught me what I was doing well already, but enhanced that a massive amount. So I can confidently say I can coach individuals, create a program with a lot of confidence and success. Beforehand, I had some good skills, but they've been enhanced even further, such as those communication skills. So I would say to any future coaches, if you're interested in enhancing your kind of line management or leadership skills, is go for it. It's a fantastic experience.
Brilliant, brilliant. Thank you, Mike. So that just leads me into how you then feel that that qualification has contributed to your own career development. So I'll pose that first, I think, to Mike, please.
Yeah, I think it's given me so much confidence, you know, in moving into any future management position. I mean, there's lots of uncertainty at the moment with NHS England or the big restructure going on, so I've had to think very carefully about, you know, what my next career step might be. But it's been so valuable, and I see my, you know, kind of a future role to include some element of coaching, and that's what I'm looking for. And I actually seen some kind of job adverts or kind of job descriptions, kind of coaching is embedded in there somewhere. Because I think it's a key part of driving performance. So it's really given me a lot of confidence to take on different situations, to manage individuals or teams. So again, I would recommend it. And I think for me, the key thing is that confidence it's given me.
Lovely. Thank you, Mike. And Will, your thoughts then of how you feel the qualification has contributed to your own career development?
Thank you. Yeah, again, very similar. I think since myself and Mike, we essentially complete the same role, but in different regions, but we're essentially taking on a lot more responsibility due to kind of restructures and things. So essentially our cohorts are almost double. So I think with the coaching and mentoring, it's allowed, I think, just a stronger lever to kind of coach, mentor, and to be more robust with the conversations that we have, rather than taking on, you know, the double the workload. Essentially, we're streamlining how we then approach some of the kind of problems or the issues that some of the trainees then face. So I think we're kind of not passing it off necessarily, but we're, you know, kind of teaching them to be very robust quickly because of the time restrictions. It's again allowed us to become more efficient in how our conversations come from, you know, whether it be, you know, becoming more diligent or promoting leadership or being more resilient. And I think that the course itself has applying those models, just enabling it, just the skill, and definitely agree with Mike, the confidence to actually have those techniques and to repeat them in a day in day out basis has been fantastic. So it's really supported my own development in terms of progressing again through managing trainees within the NHS, as well as some of our senior managers who are then supporting those too. So it's been insightful for me personally and professionally, and certainly see it kind of being a real strong kind of arm to my kind of skill set, as well as into the wider field of next role and kind of further afield.
Excellent. Oh, well, thank you both, Will and Mike. It's good to hear that it's so positive for the future for you both. So if we look then a little bit to the future and think about how maybe technology is influencing the coaching and mentoring field, what are your thoughts at the moment with, I know over the past few years, technology has just sort of spiraled, really. And we've got new ways for collecting data and using that to improve individuals in the workplace, improving our materials as well for our learning materials, but also with the new AI technology as well. What's your thoughts then, if I come to you, Will, first, on how technology is influencing that coaching and mentoring field now?
Yeah, really good question. I think it's being mindful of its opportunities, and I think making it far more streamlined for resources, far more efficient on kind of planning of sessions. And I think, you know, the digital age of being able to conduct these sessions as we are now, kind of in 3 different parts of the country.
That's
I think
right.
it's got massive scope, and I think it's made possibly coaching mentoring far more efficient for those who are busy or kind of practically can't attend face-to-face things. So it's, I think, a really key lever to support the effectiveness of sessions. But I think, definitely being mindful of the kind of the merge of AI. Although I'm not particularly concerned. I think sometimes a personal approach, I think culture, you know, AI will never have culture, and I think compared to a being. So I think the culture from how someone's come up, their philosophies and their approach, even just basic things as their character and their accent, I think as an AI bot, I like to say I would be superior to that. However, in terms of the advance of speed and I think general resources, I think it's no better time to be getting into coaching and mentoring. So I think the availability of access of resources and utilizing evidence-informed things, yes, it's no better time. So yeah, not too concerned, but being mindful of it and how it supports us, I think is key. And know its limitations.
Absolutely, yeah. No, I agree. Knowing its limitations is important. Thanks, Will. And your thoughts, Mike, on that?
Yeah, I agree with Will. I think kind of fascinated with the what's the next big innovation. It sounds like AI. It's it's here with a lot of industries already.
Yes.
And I think it will impact all of us, become a regular part of our day-to-day lives at some point. But I think with coaching, you can't beat that personal approach, especially building rapport, emotional intelligence. So, that needs to stay, and use technology to our advantage, whatever those possibilities may be with AI or whatever the next big thing is. So yeah, that personal approach is so important.
Yeah, I agree with both of you. I think it's so important to have that personal approach. There's nothing better than being face to face with somebody and building that rapport. I very much doubt you can build a rapport with a bot. So I think it's a long way off, I think, before that happens.
Yeah, we're safe for now.
That's not to say that. Sorry.
We're safe for now.
Safe for now, yes. That's not to say, though, that we can't use some of the AI to improve some of our materials that we work with to enhance our sessions. Yes, of course we can. But yeah, I think we're a long way off from them taking over. So finally, it leaves me to say, you would recommend then the course to future students, would you, Will and Mike?
Definitely.
Yeah, certainly would. Yeah.
Yeah, fantastic experience, and you were a great tutor as well, guiding us through those coaching sessions when we were doing the assignments and the CAW virtual environment where you had all those resources were fantastic as well. So good. Yeah, I think we both definitely recommend that course that we did.
Yeah, agreed.
Excellent. Well, that sort of concludes our discussion. I want to thank you both, Will and Mike. Thank you very much for your time today and taking part in the discussion on coaching and mentoring in the workplace. It's been very insightful, very interesting discussion, and I wish both of you every success for the future as coaches. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Christine.